to the Swoop's World Primetime, Thursday, November 29th, 2012. How's it going, Peter?
It's going okay.
Yeah, that's okay. No video today, man. We're just going audio only.
Old school.
Yeah, man. Stickum was acting up for us, and I said, screw it. It's time to go on.
Yeah.
Good time last night. Last night on Swoop's World Late Night. Halamid was our guest.
Yeah.
Very talented,
man. Really talented musicians. And they seem to really gel and play off each other. It's kind of we get a lot of young musicians, and a lot of times they're good, but you can tell they're still
filling each other out.
Yeah, they're still working. They haven't really kind of owned what they're doing or who they're doing it with or what have you. But these guys, they were comfortable in their own skin. You could tell they knew. Everybody knew when okay, that's his solo. And they just kind of eased off, and then it worked.
Yeah.
It was good. They're good guys.
Good time, good interview. It's in the archives. You want to check it out. It's right here at swoopsworld.com. Also available in iTunes, so you can go down to iTunes and pull it up there, as well as all kinds of other places. Stitcher, Blueberry. We're a host of places. And just about anywhere podcasts can be positioned, we are there. Got up this morning, looked at Yahoo News. Zig Ziglar died today, man. And I don't know if you ever read any of his books or anything. No,
to me, he's just sort of this guy I heard of, I know of.
Yeah.
Never really, you're at some point I gotta read that. But
I know that guy. But
yeah.
From where I don't know. Actually, I saw him. I went to a thing a few years back, and he was one of the speakers. And obviously, I didn't take his plan to heart. Otherwise, I'd be a multimillionaire now. But very, very charismatic. Fun to watch, fun to listen to. Really interesting guy, and so the motivational speaker thing is one of those type of series, and it was great because there's a lot of good speakers.
Mm-hmm.
But he was. I mean, he stole the show, and
I always wanted to know if that was his real name.
Ziggler?
That's just a great name, yeah. I can see Ziggler being I'm guessing Zig was probably
a nickname for short for Ziggler.
Yeah, it stuck. But that was perfect. You couldn't. Every time I pictured some sort of movie, he was the guy in the Zig Ziglar. Only Zig Ziglar can solve this. You know what I mean? Dick Tracy.
Exactly.
Zig Ziglar.
It's perfect for that, man. Bond? No, not Bond. Zig. Oh, totally cool. So, hey, next week on Swoop's World Late Night, it's just the three of us, man. We're just going to be chilling and having a little fun and doing our thing. And then this time next week on Swoop's World Primetime, April Economides is going to be our guest, and looking forward to talking to her. Because, she's all about bikes, as are we. And we're going to talk about some things here today. But first, we got to mention that you do have a book out.
That's right. It's Where to Bike, Orange County. And it's starting to filter into the bookshop, the bike shops. It's going to be harder to find at the bookshops, but if you do go to the bookshops, they can order it for you. And then, of course, you can always get it on the almighty Amazon.
Yeah.
And, it's out there. It highlights about 50 adult rides and 30-something kid rides, all in Orange County. And it covers everything from, fun little, couple-hour ride with, more side trips to do to, long all-day rides.
Yeah. And,
again, all around Orange County.
Cool.
It's a good-looking book.
Well, it kind of on that same vein, because you've written so many articles when it comes to biking, and I actually was reading one that you wrote for Green World 365 a few years ago about adventure cycling and stuff like that. But you've cycled, growing up all through your life and stuff. But let's talk a little bit about starting out cycling with a family, because you started your kids young with the tag along and stuff like that.
Yeah, even younger than that. I had them in the trailer. So
let's talk about that. I'm starting to see a lot more than when I met you. You're the only person I knew that was doing that. I didn't see a lot of them around, and it could just be when you buy an orange car, you don't see any, and then next thing you know, you see tons of them.
A ton of orange cars.
So I started to notice a lot of them after that. But for a person who's kind of maybe they cycle a little bit or whatever, but they got the newborn, and they want to get the family involved. What kind of steps should they take?
Well, there's lots of different things you can do, and your comment that I was the only one wasn't entirely true, but when we're talking 10 years ago, a lot of this equipment was a lot more expensive because it just wasn't in demand as much, and it has become way more people are more into it. And so there's, first of all, there's more options. There's more people out there doing it, and so there's different ways to go about it. You can get those little seats for your kids, where they sit, like the bike, the seat attaches to the bike.
I was going to just have to cut you off and mention that, because when I had young kids, that seat attached behind me on the bike.
Right.
I noticed, I've seen them now. They're attached between the rider and the handlebar.
They do still have the kinds that attach behind, but the more common ones, and I think cheaper ones, are the ones that in front, and that's the cheapest way to go. And my only reservation there would be, if the bike tips, the kid tips, and the kid's gonna get the whiplash and hit the hard. So first of all, make sure they got a helmet, especially the younger ones. All of them, but the younger ones, they'll be in these little things. They won't be able to put their hands out, and they're gonna get whacked. And then my other thing is, I always caution people about those, is that if you're not a competent, confident cyclist, that is not a good plan. It's just not. So know that you could do that safely, because even just simple things like stopping, you're getting off the bike, and if you're not aware of like how the bike can tip, I mean that can be dangerous. So that is one thing. For those of you who know that you're not really competent and confident on a bike, a great way to go are the trailers. And I don't know, when I got my trailer, it was rather expensive. I think like in the 400 range. I know they've come like 350. I know they've come down from there, but they're still.
I've seen smaller ones too.
Yeah, and mine was a double, so that was an expensive one. It was because it was a double, and so, I don't know what they are now, but they are a little more expensive. That's something. But that being said, you can only use it for so many years, so you can find them used often. Go to garage sales. Craigslist has them, so that's a way to go, and that is probably ultimately the safest way. Those things are almost tip proof. The whole bike can fall over, and they don't.
Yeah,
they'll still remain. As with anything, you can have an accident, but generally speaking, that is the safest way to go. They have like little roll bars in them. Still, I didn't have my kids in a helmet, but if you're concerned, you could do that, because I knew I wouldn't tip. So that's a great way to go when you have real little ones. Then, when you're in that point where your kid wants to ride their own bike, and they can ride their own bike,
right.
But of course they can only ride, because they have no gears and a little bike, and they can only ride, a couple miles before they're like, I'm tired. Yeah. That's where the tag along or the ride along comes in. And when I got mine's a Trek, again 10 years ago for my son. That was the only option. There weren't a whole bunch of options out there, and it was in the 150 range. I've seen now there's a number of companies producing them, and it's definitely dipped under $100. And again, this is a piece of equipment that eventually gets sold. So I've seen them as cheap as like $25-30 used.
Wow.
And so for those of you not familiar with it, a ride along is basically, it's like a bike without a front wheel. Where the front wheel would be attaches to your bike, and they have these universal attachments, so they go on almost any bike, cruisers, 10 speeds, whatever. And then the kids have a handlebar, and they're pedaling. And when they're really little, it makes no difference. But as they get older, you will notice when they're not pedaling. and the beauty of that is it allows you to ride longer distances. I've done with my kids, the whole family. I've done like 30-mile rides with them, and my daughter, who at the first time we did that was about 5. She was, we take breaks, everybody gets off and relaxes, but I mean, she didn't complain, loved it the whole time, and so it allows you to do those longer rides that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do with a small kid.
Right.
And then the other thing about that is it helps them build confidence. They feel the balance because you're on the bike with them, obviously, and so they know what that feels like. When you're turning, you're banking a little bit. They know what that feels like, and so it's a great way to get kids really comfortable on a bike and like know how that should feel.
Two things about those. One is an observation I saw based on what you just said about the balance. I was behind one recently on one of the bike paths, And the guy who's riding the bike was sitting down, and the kid in the tag-along was the entire time was leaning to the right, and I'm not sure if it was attached wrong,
right,
or if the kid's balance just wasn't there.
It could be a combination of the two. I mean,
that looked like a lot of work.
That's a lot more work. Like my daughter, there was a period there where she liked to swing back and forth, you know, and I was like, what is going on? Why am I getting this sort of jerking? And it's not enough to like it jerk me back, but it's like clearly something like almost like somebody tugging on your shirt.
Yeah.
Like, you don't stop it, you feel it. And I look over my shoulder and I'm like, you know, she probably weighed like 30 pounds at the end, but that's 30 pounds rattling back there. You know, like it's like a bowling ball. You know, you're like, what the hell? Just sit still. But you know, something I wanted to talk about, because you talked about getting your kids into cycling. One of the worst things you can do, I think, and there'll probably be people who disagree with me on this one, but are training wheels.
Well, see, you mentioned this before. You went straight from walking to pedaling without training wheels. Not many people do that.
No, not many people do. But here's the thing about training wheels is that it teaches everything wrong to the kid, because when you turn,
that's probably why the kid was leaning like that when I saw it.
It could be because when you turn your bike. Right, normally,
right.
You turn your bike and you lean. You don't. If you ever ride your bike, take a look. You hardly ever turn it. You're barely turning the wheel.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you turn it some, but you're talking like degrees.
Yeah.
Most of your turn is the lean, and you have to do that because if you don't lean, as we all know, you'll go flying off the bike. So, when you're on training wheels, the whole point is to keep you from tipping, which means you cannot lean. So when your kid goes around the corner, what he or she is learning is, I got to turn that wheel farther. Mm-hmm. So and this is all we're talking, muscle memory and experience and all that. They're learning that's what they need to do. So now they get on a real bike, or if you've taken the training wheels off, and they don't know how to lean, and they don't know the balance because training wheels kept them. So it's really counterproductive to teaching your kids how to ride. Now, if you want something safe for the kids to just putt around in a park or something like that, then that's fine. But if your goal is to get your kid comfortable and ready to ride without training wheels, it's just horrible. And
it explains why your daughter's training wheels came off so quickly.
Yes, I mean those were off really quickly. You know, and I didn't want to have them on at all, but it was a compromise between my wife and I, and they're like, all right, we'll do that. And then you'll see that what happens too is like kids will tip over. Mm-hmm. Way more often, and because it happens when you tip over on your bike, you know you're tipping.
Right.
You put your foot down, you get off the bike. Generally speaking, there's those instances where that doesn't happen. When you're on a training wheel, when you tip over, by the time you realize you're tipping over, you're so far over, there's really nothing you can do, and so you crash, and you crash hard. It's almost like that whiplash effect we were talking about.
Right.
And so again, that makes the kids scared because now look, I was on the training wheels and I fell. Now you want to take the training wheels off?
Yeah.
So there are better ways to go, and I didn't see these. I didn't know of these before. They have those bikes where you sit on them and they have no pedals at all, no chain, and you just push them. They're almost like scooters, but they have you can sit on them. The kids, it's low enough so the kids' feet are on the ground, and you just push, and then you glide, push and glide, push and glide. That's what we used to do. Like a lot of times when we were kids, just goofing off, right? We would just, So you ride your bike when when the girl you're talking to is walking. Exactly. Yeah. So what that does is it teaches your kid to, and you don't have to do that, but the advantage to this is then these pedals aren't in the way, right. So they can do that, and so they get going, and then when they turn, they bank. They know how to do it. So it's a bike without pedals, without chain, and I forget what they're called. There's a couple of companies out there now, but that's a great way to go, because then the kid, now obviously this is not something you're going to do long distance. This is something that the kids can do, but that's the other thing, is they can do it on their own, because you don't have to worry about them tipping over with training wheels, or like that time they get on the bike without any. So, and they can immediately stop by just putting their feet down.
Yeah.
So it builds confidence. Again, it's not a long distance thing. It's that time when you're like, okay, well, I don't want to buy a full bike. Kid's not ready, so we'll get a little bike with training wheels that they never use or they only use for a little while.
Right.
These bikes are oftentimes much cheaper. I've seen them made out of wood, so they look kind of like old-fashioned. So they usually are much, much cheaper, and so that once they do grow out, it's not such a big deal, and they'll already understand the concepts of balance and all that.
Right.
Then you have to teach them pedaling. That's a whole other thing, but That's the easier part to pedal.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's getting kids or families started is huge. The biggest thing, especially for the young ones, is getting confidence. Getting them confident on the bike, confident so they can stop quickly, and that's huge. Try to get that. That's more important than being able to ride far. Is stop quickly.
Because it stresses the parent out.
Yeah, there's nothing more stressful than coming up to a stop sign, going, "Oh my God, is he going to stop?"
Stop!
Yeah. And then from there, teaching the rules of the road, because obviously, we're adults. We're so used to like stop sign, stop, or that car has the right of way. They don't know that. They don't understand who has right of way. What seems, and I mean, when you stop and think about it, you're like, of course they don't. But a lot of times you'll be stopping because you're like, oh, obviously I got to stop here. It's a busy intersection. They can't tell what's a busy intersection, what's an intersection they can just coast through. So a lot of coaching, a lot of that type of stuff. But building confidence in the safety issues, making sure they know rules of the road, that is huge. And then getting these ride-alongs and other things so that you can go farther distances.
When you talk about the ride-alongs and the tag-alongs and the trailer, what was your experience when it came to drivers? Because they see the bicyclists,
right?
And I think lots of times, they're used to seeing bikes, especially more so now. So they have an idea of how much of the road you're taking up. Did you ever have any problems where they didn't see the trailer, they didn't see the tag along?
I didn't have any problems with that.
You have the big flag.
Yeah, because the flag is on. The trailer was bright yellow, so I never really had any of those issues. Along the lines of safety and all that is pick routes that are safe for your kids. That because the kids are not going to ride in a perfectly straight line, as we all know, and they're probably gonna do some swerving, and that's just what they do.
So just weird shit.
And just weird shit.
You're like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah. So pick. I ride with my kids on the streets, but I make sure those are streets that are like 9 times out of 10 residential streets, and if we are on a street that's bigger than a residential street, it's for a brief time, and it's usually in a bike lane. And you obviously sometimes make those mistakes where you're like, oh shit, this is not a safe place to go. We should have turned back there or kept straight or what have you. But generally speaking, try to ride the routes ahead of time, so that you're like, okay, because there might be routes that you're like, oh, this is a great ride, and you're looking at it through your own eyes, and you're in your line, you're in your zone, and cars are zooming past you, but you're accustomed to that. Look at it with fresh eyes. Okay, you got doors possibly opening on the right, you got cars zipping by. Yeah, maybe there's a painted bike lane, but is this a lane I want to see my kid, a bike ride I want to see my kid passing through? And so, find as much as you can. Here in LA and Orange County, we've got lots of options to ride pretty much car-free. All the riverbeds almost, LA and San Gabriel and Santa Ana and all that stuff, all have routes on them that are almost completely car-free, which still means you need to know the rules of the road, because that means there's bike traffic.
Yes.
That's a whole other thing you got to emphasize with the kids, is those little white lines and orange lines on the mean something. They mean something. Pay attention. But obviously, being car free is a huge thing. One thing I would say that I think a lot of people make the mistake is they will often let their kids or encourage their kids to ride on the sidewalk. And I personally think that's a really dangerous habit. Unless you're just talking, like, again, on that little bike, but even then, here in Long Beach we have alleys, and a lot of these alleys are blind, and so the cars, through no fault of their own, have to ride up a whole half car length to see. Yeah. And that means, so they've stopped well short of the road, they've done what they're supposed to do, and now they're sitting in the middle of the sidewalk. And so if your kid is zooming along on a bike, if he's walking, he'll stop. He's zooming along on a bike, that's a bad habit. That's a bad thing to see.
I told you about as a kid, I did that. I was zooming along on a bike.
Yeah.
On the sidewalk. I was, teenager, 12, 13, 14 years old, somewhere in there. And a truck came out of a fast food place.
Yeah.
Blind for him. He wouldn't have been able to see any peds or even, obviously, me. So he had to come down far enough so he could see if he could turn into the street.
Right.
And the timing was perfect because I didn't get hurt.
Right.
But I literally just slammed into the side of his truck and
Right.
ended up underneath his truck.
Oh man.
You know, just the bike was tweaked. I was emotionally messed up, but physically I was safe, and he was a wreck. I mean, he was like,
Sure.
"Oh my God, did I run over you?" This, I'm like, "No, you know." But I mean, he was totally right right. And
And the other thing that happens along those lines, similar problem, is not just the alleys and driveways, but when you're coming to the corner and you're crossing to the other side of the street, again, on a bike, you're zipping along. Car making a left turn or a right turn may have done everything they're supposed to do. They looked, and now you've come out of nowhere, right? Because there's bushes, or because you've come around, and like when they were looking, you weren't there when they looked that way to the right. Now they're looking to the left, make sure oncoming traffic, and now all of a sudden, you know, you've got that intersection. And I think, again, that's a really dangerous thing. Really, if the kids are old enough to ride on their own, they should definitely be riding on the streets, and they should know which streets are you know, safe. And if they're not old enough to ride along, then you should be riding with them along the streets.
Right.
And then my general rule is I'm always the outside person, you know. So we ride in pairs. There's 4 of us. So it's my daughter and I, and my wife and my son, and they're on the inside. And so, you know, that way they know. Like, if they're getting too close to me, then they're doing something wrong.
Right.
They know that they're getting too close to the road. And then, again, it teaches them, trains them, like, this is where we stop. This is where, you know, this is where it's safe to ride. And you know, that's the sort of thing you got to keep in mind. And those types of issues, again, go back to the kids don't know the rules of the road. They don't know what a driver's blind spot is.
Right.
They don't know if a driver's turning right, they're going to look once to the right to make sure there's nobody right there.
Yeah.
And then they're going to keep looking left until it's safe to go, right? Because are you supposed to do that? Perhaps not, but that's what they do. And, again, kids don't know that.
Well, you know, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back, and then we'll just talk about, you know, not riding with the family and just riding by yourselves, and some of those things you brought up. Because I noticed that, personally, I like to make eye contact with people, like even when they're going to be making a right turn and they're looking for traffic, but they've looked past me, you know, and you kind of need to get that eye contact, because I know that about the time I go in front of them and it's happened, that they start to go out because there's no cars now, right?
Yeah.
So you listen to Swoop on the Talk Story Radio Network. We're going to take a quick break, listen to one from last night's guest, Halamede, and this is called Let's Not and Say We Did. Back after this.
Just can be to a place we don't have to speak. We'll talk about everything, success and our imaginary diamond rings, and whether youths can really sing. Live in a small brick house, both of us always easily aroused. We'll spend our days naked with no one around. We'll have nowhere else to be, and it will just be you and me. Now we take this seriously. rocks are stone. Propriety is built when we're home alone. No lecherous eyes feeding off our white lights. No questions will be asked of us. No threesomes and no crocodiles. When will we know that it's time to let go? When will we know that it's time to let go? Let go. What do they say?
Welcome to Move Time Radio, presented by the Arthritis Foundation. Ah, that's a good one. Get up and dance, baby. If you're driving, pull over to the shoulder. If you're at work, yeah, time to violate the employee handbook. See, movement is just one of the ways to help fight osteoarthritis pain. Another is weight loss. You get rid of just 1 pound. That's 4 pounds of pressure off each knee. For more information on managing pain, visit fightarthritispain.org, baby. This message is brought to you by the Arthritis Foundation and the Ad Council.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29, and thanks to my college degree, I'm a systems analyst. And the college me would tell you.
I wouldn't be here without Big Brothers Big Sisters. My big brother believed in me, and to a 7-year-old...
That means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil, and Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
You're listening to the Talk Story Radio Network.
Hey, there's a sharp hole in the wall, and you're listening to Swoop World.
And welcome back to Swoop World, the Talk Story Radio Network, where we're always interactive, live, and archived. And you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and you can always download anything we have for free from iTunes. If you do, please leave a comment and a review for us. We'd appreciate that. It's always good to see those things, and helps us, direct our shows in the right directions. We're here talking about biking and stuff like that. And we were talking about how you ride with the family and stuff like this. Claiming your lane. Especially now, here in Long Beach, it's a lot of talk about being more bike friendly. And I read a blog called BikePortland.org, and they're technically, I think, have been blessed as the friendliest bike city in
They've
the
definitely
US.
won that award a couple of times, depending on who's been handing it out.
Exactly,
yes, they rank for sure.
But we're always told to claim our lane, and I keep reading these stories where it's your right and all that kind of stuff, but some of these drivers are pushing the envelope. And
I think we're really lucky here in Long Beach. I have experienced very little road rage type of stuff, but it's not to say none, but and that's gotten better. I've moved back here in 01, so in 11, 12 years, right? It's definitely, I think, overall gotten better. That doesn't mean, there aren't moments, but you have to claim your lane, but you also got to know that you're the smaller beast, and that gravity and inertia are against you, and so
tenfold at least.
Yeah, so claiming your lane is important. Knowing when, being right and alive is better. Being right and not. There's a time to yield. Yeah, is what I'm saying. And
being wrong and alive is better than being right and dead, right?
Yeah. So, I think here we're pretty good. I know I've seen and heard about a lot worse, in LA, other parts of LA, where it's just really, it's combative. And there are certain cities in Orange County that have that sort of attitude where it's like instead of putting in a bike lane, they put in a third car lane,
Yeah.
I think of Buena Park. That's one of those places that, like when I was doing the book, I could not find a single bike ride in that city. Anaheim had parts that were friendly, and then other parts that just were downright not. And so you got to know, you got to claim it, but you also got to just common sense, just you're gonna. That's a battle you're just gonna lose. So, but I want to talk something about what you said about drivers a lot of times looking past you.
Yeah.
That's really a dangerous thing, and it's just the nature of what it is. It's why they have daytime running lights, right? Because people will oftentimes look past cars that are moving 50 miles an hour.
Right.
Somebody who's, especially in busy traffic, there's a lot moving, a lot going on. They might see you and not realize that you're on a bike, first of all, so you're moving faster. And second of all, a lot of people have no idea, especially if you ride fast or you're riding through an intersection and you're moving fast, they may not realize how fast you can go. And so they're like, hey, he's on a bike. How can he cover those 30 or 40 yards? I'm going to go. I'm going to shoot across the lanes, or I'm going to, whatever. And that's where you do see that. So, and again, you do have the right of way. If they're making a left turn, right, and you're going straight through an intersection, you have the right of way. You should claim it. You shouldn't, again, assuming the light's green and all that, you should claim it. But you should also recognize the moment that they didn't see you, or they miscalculated how fast you were going, or how fast they could go, and bail, stop, get out of the way, do it, so, and as you pointed out, eye contact is huge, sometimes with people, especially here in California, tint is so dark, sometimes you can't. If you can't see their eyes because it's so dark, or it's just dark out, assume they don't see you. Always assume they don't see you. And then, if they do and they give you that nod, or you see them tracking you, that's different. You're like, okay, they see me. Because they a lot of times will look past you just because, again, there's so much going on, and they may not recognize you. And that's where wearing bright colors, there's a reason those guys look the way they do. Some of it's Euro style.
Some of it belongs at a golf course, but some of it.
But there's a reason. All of those jerseys are brightly colored, and that helmets are often brightly colored. And take advantage of that. On the bike I ride with the family, when I had time to change the bar tape, I put bright yellow on there. I put bright yellow because I couldn't get bright orange. That is that sort of thing that helps. My bags are bright red on the saddlebags. So, wear something bright, especially obviously if you're going to be traveling at night or in the dusk. When it's dark, if you're a commuter, wear bright stuff. Make yourself stand out. If your kids are riding, especially, make sure they have on a bright sweater, shirt, jersey, anything. Just make it bright. It just helps. Every little bit helps. And reflectors. People want to be cool, so they take off the reflectors. And they do that because racing people, right, the racers who kind of dominates the bike industry, is that mentality. It's not cool. It weighs too much. Those things are so light.
They're racing at close
Right, and they're racing on closed courses.
Exactly.
With, leave the reflectors on. If they fall off or break off, replace them. Anything that just makes you stand out is a good thing. Yeah. And especially for the kids. The kids don't like it. I know I always took mine off when I was a kid. Too. Because it's not cool.
Cards, baseball.
Yeah, right? It's just not cool. But make sure they're on there for the kids especially because they need it more than anybody else because they're the ones most likely to do something unpredictable.
Yeah.
You can even get tires that have like a kind of like white walls. They have like reflective.
I've seen those.
Yeah. Stuff. I personally have a brand of tires I like for other reasons, but if you know you're going to do a lot of riding at night, not a bad idea. They do sometimes cost a bit more, but again, you're riding at night. You need to pay more. You need to get that little extra. And then they also have like reflective tape.
Yeah.
Like, if you know you're going to be riding a lot, especially at night or early in the morning, a bit of reflective tape, on key parts of your bike won't slow you down. It's light. And when it gets dirty, it can be replaced or, falls off, put more on. So that's, again, another thing that is useful. Visibility is, a lot of times when you hear of an accident or you see an accident, afterwards, interviews are going on and, well, what happened? I never saw them.
Yeah.
That's almost always the first thing they say. I never saw them. And, that's probably the single biggest thing you could do to make yourself safe. Besides following the rules of the road, next biggest thing is make yourself visible.
When you're talking about people not, and I'm going to choose to believe that this guy didn't realize that even at my slow pace that I was covering as much ground as I was. Because just recently I'm riding along, and we kind of did the whole, because of the traffic flow and my speed and my timing of the lights. We kept going past each other and stuff.
Right.
And he actually kind of saw me at one time and stuff. I think I was going to meet you up at the coffee place we're going to go. And then I come up to the major intersection up there by Atlantic, and the guy passes me up and then cuts in front of me so he can make a right turn, which nearly threw me into the sidewalk or curb or whatever.
Right.
And then he had to stop because he couldn't turn right. And instead of laying behind me, whatever, or whatever. But the thing is he cut in front of me at a pace where I really had to just lock him up just to keep from hitting him.
See, and that's driver etiquette, and I'm betting that somebody that's like that, they would have done that if you were in a car as well.
Yeah.
I'm guessing because essentially if you're on your bike, you're slow moving traffic.
Right.
If you were a car moving slow, unless there's enough, space for him to pass and then move in front of you, legally, he's supposed to obey the laws of the road. She's supposed to wait behind you until you make your turn or continue straight. So in that instance, again, you got to be aware. You got to be always alert at those intersections. But in that instance, there's not much you can do. That's why you gotta be paying attention. And part of that is you doing the right thing, being in the right spot, which it sounds like you were. So that's the scarier part of cycling and motorists is that moment where, and it happens when you're in your car too, where you're driving, you're doing the thing, all of a sudden somebody turns left in front of you.
Right.
You're like, whoa, that wasn't supposed to happen. Now you're hammering on the brakes. So it can happen obviously in a car it can be deadly too, but it's
you see, when you're in the car, you land on a horn, ring, 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 ring.
Yeah, right? Well, back in my days when I was in my youth, I'd have ridden up to the side of that car and delivered a powerful kick to their side door.
But you've matured so much.
I was known to do that.
And you can outride them.
Yeah. Now I just stick with obscene finger gestures if they're really, really necessary.
It's I had a guy tell me one time. He said sometimes you have to speak in a language that affords him to understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's just unfortunately how it has to be sometimes. But obviously that doesn't help relations. So try to keep that stuff to a minimum. You know, I always adopt the kill 'em with kindness attitude most of the time.
Especially when the thing is, and this is just not just cycling; it's just life. You know, when you got kids, you have that one behavior when the kids are there. When the same thing happens when the kids are there, you have the one behavior, as opposed to when you're by yourself.
Because as we know, as we've all found out in those embarrassing moments where they've repeated or done exactly what you did in the wrong moment.
Exactly.
Because they recognize this. Oh, this is what Dad does. So you don't want them doing that either. But I mean, I find that in Long Beach, etiquette and courtesy is people see more bikes. They're used to more bikes.
It's getting a lot better.
Is it perfect? No. And some cyclists create problems by blasting through red lights and stuff like that. And, you know, if you come to a four-way stop and there's no one there, obviously ride through. If you come to a four-way stop and there's another car there.
Rules of the road, man.
Rules of the road. Stop. Now, if they wave you on, which a lot of
times they do.
Yeah, a lot of times they will. Especially, I get that. Especially when I'm with my kids, you know, they'll see that I've got kids, and they know how difficult it is to like get them all. A lot of times, get that wave through that nod, or you know, but don't assume it.
Yes.
You know, do the right thing. Honestly, it's not gonna. If you're on the bike, you're not trying to make your best time anyhow, right? You're riding.
You're right. You're enjoying life.
Yeah. So stop and let them go. And again, a lot of times you'll see somebody nod or wave you on, and if they do that, give them a nod. Yeah. You know, don't be a dick about it.
How about a thank you, man?
Yeah. You know, give them a nod or a little, you know, wave or, you know, something. You know, just, and because then they're more likely to do it next time to the next rider.
Yeah.
And, you know, pay it forward sort of thing.
Well, speaking of, we've talked a lot about motorist etiquette, and let's talk about. I want to talk about some bike experience I've had recently, and what you think about this too. First of all, I don't normally ride the riverbed on the weekend, so this could be just as common thing. But I rode it last Saturday, I believe it was, and a lot of big. I don't know if they're clubs, groups. Let's put it, groups of riders of more than 5 or more.
Yeah. Pelotons.
Yeah, and a lot of times they're riding 3 abreast, which puts one of them in the opposite lane.
Yeah.
And they weren't given, and they weren't.
That pisses me off.
Yeah,
it really does, and it's that same mentality, you know. And that Grant Peterson writes a great book called Just Ride, and he's the guy who owns Rivendell Bicycle Works. I don't own one of those bikes, but I do want to own one of those bikes one of those days.
We do geek out on that website every once in a while.
Yeah, and he has a book, and he talks all about the idea, the concept that the bicycle industry is changing, but it is largely driven by the racer mentality. You know, bikes have to be super light, and we have to wear this crazy clothing, and you know that's really not comfortable. It's not comfortable. I mean, no, it might be comfortable when you're on the bike. The minute you get off the bike, it's not comfortable. And yet we're told we have to wear that, and we're told that our bikes have to be super light. And again, none of that applies unless you're a racer. And that racer mentality is still a big part of the bike industry and the cyclist mindset. And there is this concept that because I can ride faster and farther than you, I'm the better cyclist. I own more of that road, that bikeway, and you see that. Now, I certainly don't want to say that all people are like that, all cyclists or all club members are, but you do get that, and that's the only thing that can explain that mentality of, you know, now obviously, if there's no oncoming traffic and you want to ride 3 abreast,
who cares?
Do so.
But when people start coming in,
yield to the oncoming traffic as it would anything else. And so it's one of the problems in cycling is that we do have tribes, you know, as any other, and sometimes tribes don't get along. The tribe that seems to get along the least, in my experience, with everyone else are the racer tribe. You know, the sometimes they're called Freds, you know. And again, I don't want to say all of them, but you get that group that just has that, like, we ride so many more miles than you, and we're, you know, and it's just a bad attitude, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help everybody else get along, and in this instance, we're talking about an instance where it can be dangerous. It can actually be deadly because you move fast enough.
Not only that, it's for me the time, and I hit like 3 groups that did that as I was heading south, which means that it's wide enough. But if I were to jerk off, I could end up going down that little you know how that thing slopes all the way down to the water.
Yeah. Flood channel there.
Yeah, and pretty much I'm capable of kind of managing not doing that. But there's a lot of people on the thing that day, and some of them were kids and stuff like that. And these guys weren't given. I mean, they would command our lane also.
Yeah.
And it's just like, the first time it went by, it's like, that was kind of shitty.
Yeah.
The second time it happened, I go, that's getting fucked up. But the third time, I was just like, I'm not moving.
Yeah. Well, see, I ride with my own little Peloton, right? Because there's 4 of us. So a lot of times we just force them to. But there are those instances where and it just bothers me. And honestly, it doesn't happen too often. So I don't want to say, or at least I haven't experienced it a lot. But when it does. It's just annoying. And it goes back to sometimes, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Sometimes bicyclists can be their own worst enemy. If we all want to get along, we all have to use a certain space. We all have to use the roadways. If you got some guy in a car weaving in and out on the freeway, you're like, that's messed up, right? Because now he's going to cause an accident. It might be with me or whatever. It's just not safe.
Right.
Same idea. We can have our different tribes, but certain etiquette, we all need to follow and obey, and otherwise, it takes the fun out of it.
Yeah, and another thing is and I know it's just like with driving or anything you do, hiking, driving, anything you do out on public land, everybody's there for a different reason.
Right.
And you have to kind of respect that. I didn't even know, like, when I sometimes would go and hike the wetlands over, area, I'm mostly just there to just get a sweat up and just keep walking. But there's people there who are stopping, taking pictures and this and that. And sometimes they stop in a group in the middle of the path, and sometimes they kind of move to the side and take things in, and you gotta have to work with that. I think a lot of times when you start talking about places like the river trail, not your normal bike lane on the down the middle of a business area in a business district, but when you talk about river trail and stuff, there's a lot of nature. There's a lot of stuff going on, and you kind of have to take into you kind of have to take it in that there's people there for a variety of reasons.
Right.
And I understand that it's also a good place to just open it up and take it out. But on the weekends there, I think you have to kind of go, well, there's a lot of people out here. There's a few loose Rottweilers around here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on, and I think at points in times you either have to share the road or slow down a bit just because of there's a group of kids up there.
Yeah.
I like I said, I hadn't ridden the weekend there in a long time, and there was a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot
even at my pace.
When I first moved back to the area, I would ride the river because it's a great ride, and I could ride the river and see nobody besides like the homeless people. I'd like literally be riding for an hour and see 1 or 2 cyclists, 1 or 2 people. It's like you go there on a Friday or Saturday, especially if it's a nice day out, and it's not as busy as say the Santa Ana River or the San Gabriel, but there are a lot of people.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we have a wider bike path there, and so we're able to accommodate comfortably a larger group of people than say like the San Gabriel, which is a much narrower path. And so etiquette does become, because it's a recreational trail.
You got
it's
horses on
designated.
there.
Yeah, in LA you got horses,
pedestrians,
and then you start getting lots of, as you said, like bird watchers. And then you get people out there. They're cleaning. You get cleanup crews going and volunteers sometimes doing cleanups, and you got to be. It's like anything else. If you head down to Belmont Shore at 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and your goal is to pass through there as fast as possible, well, then you've already made the wrong mistake, right? You should have gone around. You should have found an alternate way to get to where you're going.
You should have, exactly.
'Cause you're not going anywhere quickly, And it's the same thing. Yeah, if you want to go fast and all that, then you got to find the right paths and don't try to do it at Saturday, 12 o'clock, on a sunny day when everyone else is trying to enjoy the outdoors as well.
Yeah.
Save that for get up earlier, or what have you. Find a different ride on the roads where you can pretty much, you'll have stop lights and all that, but you could go as fast as you want, Anyhow, it's like that anything. You got to know where you are, what time, and what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly. We were talking a lot about being out on the road riding this episode. Last time we talked about the mechanics of it, and just based on what's been happening here this week, commuters, people who commute, this is their primary form of transportation. Rainy weather, slick roads. What kind of advice do you have for them?
Well, first of all, if you're going to do that, if you're going to commute, and you're going to commute when it rains as well, if you haven't figured this out already, get some fenders.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're so simple. And again, they're not cool because racers don't use them. So, bikes in like Holland, China, the fenders are built on them. They come with fenders. Yeah. You don't have to. It's not like an add-on that you got to search for to find that fit your bike. They're built with, and it makes total sense. Yeah. Again, if you're a racer, that's going to slow you down. It's weight, creates drag. But if you're not a racer, especially if you are a commuter and you want to ride, that right there makes cycling possible in the rain. So number one, get those. The other thing is be especially bright. And, just like when you're in a car, in some ways even more so, if you don't have disc brakes, especially if you have the normal caliper, pinching brakes, it's going to get wet. There's going to be grit on the road, which means it's going to be on your tire and your wheel. Stopping is going to be harder, so plan. Ride a little slower if necessary. Plan to stop, slow down earlier than necessary. And then the biggest, probably the most dangerous thing if you're riding on roads is paint. The reflective paint especially, that usually marks any intersection. That stuff can be deadly. You go to cross it and all of a sudden your bike has slipped out from underneath you. Right. When you're starting, be especially careful because, and this is true whether you're on the paint or on the road, your back wheel might spin, right? It might spin out, it might give way. If it does that, you are likely to get pitched forward or to the side off of your bike. So, try to, when you come to a stop, try to be in a lower gear than you normally would be. And when you take off, don't just get up out of the saddle and start going like you might often do. To start off a little smoother. And that will hopefully help you prevent, that spin out. Because that's when you get pitched forward, and that can be ugly. So, yeah. And then stay off the paint as much as possible. Yeah. And I tell my kids that, like, sometimes we'll get going and it'll have been foggy or just misty. And, the ground is still wet. And the paint is so dangerous. Gutters as well. Gutters will fill with water. Gutters that were perfectly dry that you could ride over and you did every time are now full of water, and there's that little slimy, there's grease or whatever, and boom, again, my wife had an accident like 2 or 3 years ago, and that's how it was. She went through gutter. I was always telling her, don't do that. She wanted to ride up and press the button, so we could cross faster. I'm like, just go around. Don't go up. Sure enough, spilled right over. Fortunately, she didn't suffer any major damage, just a sore shoulder. But, gutters, anything like that will fill up, and who knows what they'll fill up with, and just try to stay out of them. And then, know your ability. If you're not capable of riding on slick, perhaps icy, not so much here, but in other places, ground, know your ability. Ride within your ability. So if you are not comfortable or not capable of handling like those shifts that sometimes happen when you're pass over a slippery or icy patch, then just take the bus, call a friend. Yeah. If you have a car, get in the car, whatever. Don't go out in what is beyond your capability.
Right. The a lot of the what do they call those, drainage grates, or the the grates in the road that drainage grates.
Yeah, sewer grates.
Yeah, I noticed it a lot. You know, I always tell my kids you got to kind of try to avoid them if possible, because a lot of them, the gaps are actually wider than your tires.
Yeah, and they're oftentimes they've paved so many times over them that it's quite a dip.
Yeah,
it's like and it's not like a gentle dip; it's a fall off, and you got to be careful about those. Again, especially as it rains, that's another slick metal, right? It's going to slide. But anytime you should try to, and cities like Long Beach are seeing those and filling those in or putting in alternate types of. So that's nice. Cities down in Orange County that are newer build them in such a way that they're not even there. Like, I mean, they're still sewers, but you're not riding. Right. Places where you got to be really careful are like in metropolitan areas, like LA. You know, downtown is where, you know, they just don't have the resources, and in some cases, it has to be there. There's no way it can be anywhere else, and so you have to be aware of that. And you know, as you approach something like that, a lot of times you're going full speed. Be ready to, if you're going to have to swerve, know that there's no cars coming, or that, you know, and worst case scenario, stop if you have to, or slow down enough so you can pass it. But you know, sometimes you're riding streets you don't know, you're unfamiliar with, and nothing you can do about it. You know, try to find the roads that aren't like that, obviously, which is easier to say. But you know, especially if you're like you're a commuter, you know, and you know you're riding the same route, and there's that one road where you have all of these, and now you're swerving into traffic, and you already have a limited space. You know, again, if you're commuting by bike, you're not trying to get anywhere as fast as possible, because there are faster ways.
Right.
Go a different route, you know. Go over one more street, and maybe it adds, you know, a mile or so, which is a few minutes' time. Leave a little earlier, you know. Traveling on a bike, you know, you got to change your mentality. It can't be, well, not that it can't be, but I find it's more enjoyable if I don't think of it as I'm in a car trying to get somewhere as fast as possible.
Right.
You know, I'm on a bike trying to enjoy the getting there.
Well, you know, you mentioned something here, and we'll close around that. You know, it's, you know, you might have to go around and something. I noticed, you know, when you're in a car and your route is shut down for some reason, it's pretty simple to detour off. I've had a couple of detours recently with construction and things like that, and sometimes it's not as simple on a bike. Sometimes it's taking you a ways away, or into an area you really don't want to be kind of tooling along in.
Yeah.
Or you have to double back or things like that. So, you know, you do have to allow, unless you're just riding, like you said, without that sense of urgency or any, you know, really a major time frame, you have to allow for those situations, which means lots of times if you're commuting, you're going to be accustomed to coming to work maybe 20, 30 minutes early, which you kind of have to do sometimes, depending on how far you ride, just to freshen up. But you have to allow for that, because the 1 or 2 times that happens a year, unless you've already pre-programmed alternate routes,
right? Yeah.
You know, it's kind of, you gotta go, okay, where do I need to go from here? Or you know, that's railroad tracks and this over there, and it's really, you know, worse conditions to do that. You know, and sometimes you just can't get through. So.
Yeah, you gotta be, you know, I find it again, if you're commuting, have plans, and you gotta have a different mindset, I think, to really enjoy that. You know, cycling, you know, as a form of transportation, you have to kind of change your mindset. You're not trying to get anywhere necessarily as fast as possible. You know? And if you have that, and you're ready to kind of, you know, make those decisions and kind of go, oh, this is not going to work, we got to go somewhere safer, that's the better way to go. You know, and again, and along those lines is the major thoroughfares were designed, at least where we live, for cars.
Right.
A lot of times there are perfectly acceptable alternatives for cyclists. You know, ride one street in, like, you know, ride through the residential. You don't do that in your car, because in your car, one is oftentimes it's illegal, but if it is not, you don't like all the stop signs, and the road's too narrow, so you can't go too fast, and the speed limit is 25, and out here on the big road is 45. Right. I mean, no brainer. That's the idea. So, I mean, I think I've mentioned this before. I see people riding down Big Cherry here, which is near my house. That is the least safe road I can think of in Long Beach to ride.
It is, because I've ridden it.
Deadly. And I see people there. I'm like, my God, you're taking your life and your. All they had to do was ride one block in, and they'll be able to ride the exact same distance, and they'll have stop signs. But again, as we've talked about, on a bicycle, that's not a big deal. It doesn't really slow you down much, and it'll be infinitely safer to do that ride. So no, again, so if you're commuting and you have to travel, say you work on Cherry, don't actually ride on Cherry. Ride alongside it, and then cut over when you need to.
Exactly.
And that's a mistake I think a lot of people make with cycling, is that they do have a right to be on that road. They do have a right to be on Cherry, but that doesn't mean you should just exercise that right. Find that alternate, and in this case, it would only cost you, as far as time, it would cost in distance. It cost you a couple hundred, not even a couple hundred yards, like 10 or 50 yards.
Yeah,
and you'd be way safer. You'd enjoy it a lot better. So think about, try to change how you think when it comes to that. Don't get on your bike and think like you're in your car.
Right. Well, that's a good one, man. Next week we have April Economides with us, and she'll be talking about bike communities and kind of the things that she does, and we'll be looking forward to talking to her next week on Late Night. Swoop. Who's I? I read. I call myself in the third person here. Myself, Peter, and T-Bone will be here, and we'll be doing our usual thing, drinking some beers, telling some crazy ass stories, reading some news and sports and news of the day. So we'll look forward to doing that. To those of you who have some decent weather this weekend, go out and have a good ride.
Yeah, get on a bike.
Get on a bike. Good day, all.
The views and opinions expressed by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Talk Story Radio, its affiliates, or sponsors.